Hello, and thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today as we dive into the kind of the love-hate relationship that sales has with CRM, guided by a salesperson who's experienced both to share his real-life feedback and his experiences. Now, I'm Chad Collette, the Director of Marketing here at Ledgeview Partners. For those that may not be familiar with Ledgeview, we're a business and technology consulting company that partners with organizations that we focus on transforming your sales, your marketing, your customer service, operations, and processes that are really supported by core technologies, including CRM solutions like Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics 365. Ledgeview is a longtime partner of both of these leading CRM solutions, but today's content is going to be agnostic. So it doesn't matter if you have one of these solutions, if you're evaluating them, or if you have another one that you currently utilize. Now, before we get started, I want to let you know that today's webinar is being recorded and it's going to be available on demand after this session. You're going to receive a follow-up email from me after the webinar is complete with a link to access the presentation. Now, if you haven't already, make sure you add @ledgviewpartners.com to your safe senders list. So it really ensures that you get our emails. And if you happen to find us in your clutter, your junk, or your spam, please mark us as safe senders. You know, we encourage you to share this and any of our resources within your company and also professional networks. Now, to ensure the best audio quality, we've got everybody in listen-only mode. If you have a question or a comment, you know, we really encourage you to submit those in the question pane of your GoToWebinar control panel or in the survey that's going to follow this webinar. We're going to follow up with any questions within 24 hours, so please bring them on. Now that I got those housekeeping items out of the way, I want to welcome today's presenter, Jason Lane. Jason's one of our Ledgeview account executives, and when he told me about his experiences with CRM over his sales career, we knew we had to share those and help others succeed with CRM and really avoid some of the roadblocks that he encountered. I know I'm looking forward to hearing his story. So Jason, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Chad, and thanks for the overview and the nice introduction. Really appreciate it. And like you mentioned, Chad, and for those of you out there, what happened was I was having conversations with clients and I was starting to hear a lot of the same things that I went through as a young sales rep and first being introduced to a contemporary sales platform or a CRM platform. And so that's when Chad and I sort of had the conversation, and then it snowballed into, hey, let's just tell the story and perhaps you can get a nugget or two out of this. And it'll help you sort of position your thinking for those of you that are looking to implement a new CRM platform or to maybe go from a less robust or a less complex CRM into something that's a little more complex or maybe a little more configurable to fit your needs. And so that's really the goal today. I'm just going to really talk about my experiences, a little bit about my background, and again, hope that you can get some information from that standpoint. So I want to give a little bit about my background just to give you some context of where I came from and sort of where I was before getting into a sales platform, and then sort of, you know, what I've learned over the years, some consistencies that I've seen, and some things that again may be helpful for you as you're imagining going through a similar sort of launch or rollout of a new CRM platform. Before we begin, I wanted to go over some of the essentials of CRM, some of the basics. Now, there's a lot of information out there. You can search on countless YouTube videos. You can find a bunch of ebooks, blog posts. Ledgeview.com has a wealth of information for the platforms that we focus on, Salesforce and Microsoft. And you can really get a great understanding of what CRM means today, what it can mean for your sales team, for your marketing team, for your customer service, and really is, if you look at that holistically, what it means for your outreach processes as a whole. Now, you know, for me as a salesperson on the ground level, I'm still an individual contributor at Ledgeview. I've been in that type of a role for my entire career. And, you know, there's a couple things on this list that really stick out. One is automating tasks. Now, as you can imagine, we all want our days to be easy as possible. And for me, you know, we call on a variety of different customers in different industries. I call on both prospects. I work with active clients. You know, I have sort of an open geography, so I can look in a variety of different arenas to try to find business and to get into some good conversation. So the less that I have to worry about on a day-to-day basis about keeping track of information or making sure information gets in the right place, the better for me. And I know most salespeople are going to feel the same way. The other bullet point here, bullet point number 3, gaining visibility into your sales pipeline. I can say this as a salesperson, we're all measured by our quota. First and foremost, we have to hit our numbers. We have to be able to provide good insights into active opportunities. We have to close business. And of course, we have to help contribute to the overall pipeline. And so for me to have better conversations with my director and my executive team as I'm building out my territory and getting into opportunities, the more information I can have into my pipeline, into my opportunities, into my accounts, those that I've both won and those that I've lost, the better for me and the better for most salespeople for that matter. At the end of the day, the more that a company can accurately forecast quarter or next year, the better they can make decisions, at least in terms of initiatives for growth, going into new markets, perhaps new product lines, and so on and so forth. So for me, those are the two that really stand out. Now, if you look at CRM from a salesperson perspective, it's really about what your team needs, and that can be from an individual user. It can be the personality of your team. It could also depend heavily on what kind of services or products that you sell. And of course, these are discussions that you would want to have early on as you're trying to determine what the best system is for you. Now, some of the challenges that organizations are facing today with CRM, there's some options, right? We again are agnostic. We focus on a couple different CRM platforms. We can also, and I say we, LedgeView can also consult on sales processes regardless of the technology platform. The same for marketing and customer service. So when you're thinking about a CRM platform, or when organizations are looking at the options, it's really about what can you design, what can you configure to fit your processes. And I think that's the biggest challenge, because if you want to get user adoption to 100%, or if you want to make sure that your investment is successful overall, not only in the beginning around go live, but for the length of your stay with that platform, it's all about configuring it to fit your needs, but then also providing enhancements in places where obviously you didn't have before you went into a new contemporary platform. Just a little bit about my background, just again to provide some context to where I'm coming from. I started in sales right out of college. I fell into sales accidentally. I was in a bank role with a large company in a grocery store setting. Now, at that time, I'm going to age myself a little bit. That was a relatively new concept. They were setting up bank kiosks, and I would handle some teller type work, some checking account deposits, savings deposits, but I was also responsible for selling new accounts, money market accounts, non-licensed investments, and home equity lines. So that was my first real understanding of what sales was as a young entry-level salesperson. But even then, if I think back to what I was doing then, I was collecting information. So if somebody walked up, I didn't know if they were an active customer or what kind of products they had with us, and I'd have to sort of uncover information and develop relationships from that standpoint. And it's simplistic, it's at a very basic level, but at that time, I would collect notes and I'd put them in whatever system we had, or just keep notes in my desk, and I would have that information to be able to carry forward for perhaps growing that relationship or helping out a customer if they had a customer service issue for that matter. Now, my career has grown a lot over the last 20 years. And one of the reasons I thought, it might be helpful to do a webinar like this was because I do have a kind of a wide perspective of using CRM in a variety of different roles. I've sold products that are high transactional, high volume. I've sold services. I've sold capital equipment and software. And then of course here with LedgeView, of course we have very distinct software discussions, but we're a consulting partner. We are a service-based firm. And so again, some of those conversations I've had in the past are very similar to what I'm having now with respect to using CRM, developing relationships, so on and so forth. So I hope, again, I've mentioned it before, that maybe there's a nugget or two you can grab from the webinar today that would help you as you're making decisions on looking at a new CRM platform. Again, I've already said I'm aging myself, and I go back to my early days. I went from banking into pharmaceutical sales, and I was in pharmaceutical sales at a time when we still used carbon copy paper to keep track of all the samples we were handing out. Now, I don't know if it's done the same in terms of samples. Obviously, technology is a lot different in pharma today, but back then we carried thousands of dollars worth of drugs in our trunk, and we would visit doctors' offices, medical groups, and hospitals, and we deliver those samples, so the doctors can gain a familiarity with the products. Then we would keep track of those on paper. So every visit, every day, every week, I would collect those, drop ship them in, and our company my company would keep track of that from an inventory standpoint, but then also from a regulatory standpoint. So really it relied on a lot of trust for individuals to keep track of the information and to do so accurately. Again, much different in the pharma world today, I can only imagine, but it does give you an idea. When I mention coming from manual or disjointed processes, I really mean that. I was on Excel sheets, my own personal notes, keeping track of things through email. And so again, when I hear those discussions from clients today, I can truly relate. I can truly understand what they're coming from when they're saying, look, we need to centralize processes or just be a little more efficient in how we're collecting information. And so that's something that resonates with me. Now, the company that I went to after my pharma role was the first company that I was introduced into a contemporary sales platform. In that case, it happened to be Salesforce. And at the time, the company was growing. And this is another consistent thing that I'm still hearing today, that a lot of organizations that are exploring a new CRM platform are doing so because they're growing. They're spreading out. They're increasing their footprint. In this case, my company was born out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. They were in the upper Midwest, the lower Midwest, which where I was located, the Southeast, the Southwest, as well as the Pacific Northwest. And they were growing through acquisition and organically. And so they needed to really standardize processes, centralize information, and just apply consistency across the entire sales team. Now, at the time that they rolled out Salesforce, it was interesting. We had a little bit of an introduction prior, but it was really about coming together as a group in a meeting and having sort of a couple days of really jumping in head first and learning the system and being trained on some of the basics right out of the gate, understanding why it was going to be implementing and really what it meant for our jobs. And I mention this because at that time it worked. We're obviously in a different world right now as we speak, but the point being, as you think about it, when you launch a CRM platform, perhaps you're going to do it with a smaller team. Perhaps it's just a few super users, depending on the size of your team, before you then roll it out to your group as an entirety, or perhaps you'll roll it out regionally based. Just think about, from the sales user standpoint, what information you're going to disseminate and when. And I'll even come back to this a little bit when I talk about some of the tactics that my company used at the time that I thought maybe they could have improved on as I think back things, many years later. Now, it was funny when I was going through this and I was sort of thinking of some of those initial feelings, some of that gut reaction, some of the rumors that we heard on the floor. It was almost a little embarrassing to say this because, at the time it was totally new to me. I'd never been on a CRM like Salesforce before, and I'd never really been in a really an entirety new at a product launch from an entirety standpoint of front to, learning it from day one from scratch, no experience, no history. And for that matter, the team that I was on, nobody on my team had experience on Salesforce, let alone a CRM as well. So you can imagine some of the rumors, I think there's a phrase, misery loves company. And, it's easy to say, what's the company want to see now? What are they looking at? This is going to be more work for us. Okay. We're not, because at the time, again, initial gut feeling was, well, what we're doing is working. And so now I've got to add it into this additional place. I mean, my Excel sheets were fine, my Word documents, my correspondence with my manager, we were getting the job done. Now I'm going to have to add an extra layer of work by putting it in the CRM. Because there might not have been that understanding, or perhaps there was just some, a little skepticism around this is really going to be adopted fully. And then, of course, what's this replacing? Are we going to need all of us out there in the field if we got this nice, unique CRM platform? Again, it's almost funny to go back and rehash some of this, but it's the truth. And I've had conversations with clients today, and I hear the phrase, well, we've got some tenured reps. We've got some folks that are a little stubborn. We've got some folks that have been around and they've done things a long time. And, you get to that point to where, this is, the speculation, this is only going to slow us down. This is going to make our jobs harder. Another thing to think about, by the way, so one of the things that we were experiencing at my company when we were introducing CRM was we were pretty successful. Our region in particular was doing really well. I had a center. I was responsible for a center that was in my territory as far as the medical services we provided, and we were doing really well. So there's a mentality of why fix it if it's not broken? Why are we adding this if we're doing so well? And of course, as you can imagine, if you're doing well from a sales perspective, from a revenue perspective, maybe that affords you the opportunity to add new software or new technology so you can evolve your team a little bit. So of course, that's a natural step. But you can imagine people on the ground level, and I was one of them in the sales role at least, saying, gosh, why do we need to add this? We're already doing things really well and we're getting the job done. So these are just some things that, if I was being honest with myself as I was going back and thinking about how I felt, and definitely how some of my teammates felt, these were some of the things that were sort of bubbling to the surface as we were having those initial meetings. Now, there were some things that my company did really well. Now, again, what I shared with you before is more of a gut reaction, more of that first couple days, sales people are talking to each other and we're all worried and we don't understand. This is going to be difficult. And this, by the way, happens with all software. It doesn't have to be CRM. I've sold software in a variety of different roles, and that concern is always there. In fact, one of the nice things that LedgeView will do as part of our services is provide some tips on change management, help you prepare your team. And this is, of course, along the lines, this webinar is supposed to be sort of to go with that theme of, what are ways that you can prepare and think about how you're going to roll out a CRM from the perspective of a salesperson. And my company did a good job, eventually getting to the point of, look, what we're automating processes. This is going to make your job easier. And here's how. And it's going to make you smarter because this information is going to be available. And this information is going to go up through the channels, and it's eventually going to help everybody out. And of course, it was very evident early on that we needed to be accountable for this, for learning this system and for using this system. And I think one of the most important things, and I've alluded to this before, is designing the system to feel like the processes that we already have in place. I always look at software in two different fashions. It should be, most software, especially CRM platforms, out of the box are really configurable. They're highly configurable. There's years and years and years of coding and development have gone behind these systems, especially with these big providers like Salesforce and Microsoft. That, you should be able to, without a lot of custom development, be able to design a system to really fit your processes, and that's going to ease user adoption more than anything else. And even if you have to invest in a little bit of custom development to get a system to fit your processes, that's only going to be better. The other way I look at software is obviously adding enhancements, right? There's going to be things it can provide that you simply can't get without having a unified platform, I should say, and one that, increases efficiencies, allows greater visibility and control into your processes. And then the last point I'll make on this, when I talked about the company and some of these tactics, sometimes it just comes down to a good old-fashioned example or analogy or just some conversation. I remember our VP getting in front of the room and saying, you all know I hate to fly. And she truly did. She was based out of Minnesota, but again, I mentioned the company was growing in almost all four corners of the country. And she had to go, whether it was quarterly, definitely every few months, to visit different regions, different centers as she helped onboard different sales teams and so on and so forth. And she said, look, I can't go to my boss and say, I don't want to fly. It's just not going to happen. Flying is a fundamental part of her job. And again, I mentioned before, it seems like a simplistic example or simplistic view, but it's the truth. If you set the position with your sales team or your marketing team or your customer service team, whoever's going to be in that CRM, look, this is now going to be a part of your job. Hopefully you're going to give them the tools. Hopefully you'll have, a sort of an onboarding timeline and they'll be able to train and adopt to the system. But really, once they understand, look, we're not turning back from this. This is a new tool we're investing in as a company. This is what it means that, this is now, a fundamental part of your job. Now, there's a couple things looking back. Hindsight's 2020, as they always say, and I can look back and think of a couple just small things that the company maybe could have done a little differently. I maybe would have liked a little more pre-launch education and awareness, ramping up before we had that meeting. You can control that information, right? You can have the ability to make sure that you're just delivering the right information and not overwhelming reps or teams with, hey, this is coming, be prepared for it type situation. The other thing I think would have been a little more helpful is I can remember being so, we're kind of tunnel vision. We're on the ground level as a salesperson. We're using the system. We're trying to figure out how to input information. We're understanding the workflow. The user interface is different. The buttonology is different. What is how do you run these reports? You can export this stuff to Excel. It's really about what does it mean to us? And of course, because that was important, but having not really a lot of perspective from the executive level. Like, what does it mean for my VP of the region? What does it mean for our corporate VPs, our chiefs, our CEO, our chief revenue officer, our marketing officers? And that's, I think, something that would have been helpful to have a little more information from the executive team or from our champions of the platform at the company I was with, to sort of explain, look, we're going to be able to make better decisions as a whole. Companies can, with a good, healthy, accurate forecast and an accurate pipeline, you can make strategic decisions. You can shape initiatives around how you're going to grow. You can help be prepared for when maybe there's a dip in revenues or there's going to be a lull in a quarter. Or for Ledgeo, I know a lot of times in July, things seem to be down, as it is for a lot of companies, because it's, post school and summertime. And so you can start to see those trends every month, every quarter, every year, the more that you can collect that data and have it be accurate and make smarter decisions. And so that was something, again, putting myself in the shoes back to when I was first learning CRM, that would have been a little more helpful to know. As I look back, of course, I wanted to be a little more open-minded. I think we all want to evolve as people, whether it's professionally or personally. And I think I feel like I was definitely a stubborn sales rep. And when I hear a client or a prospective client talk about being, having those stubborn sales reps or those folks that are just used to doing the way they're doing, I have to chuckle, because that was me. And I'm not afraid to admit it, because I have learned to use CRM and I've learned to make it a great tool for me. But at that time, I was definitely falling in that trap of, oh my gosh, what does this mean? And so the other thing is too, it really, I tend to lean on being a little bit of a pessimist sometimes. I can't help trying to be a little more optimistic about, hey, how can this help me? And using that early on, right? Learning when I'm watching somebody train me, or I'm learning how to use certain parts of the system, how can that help me make my job better or easier versus harder? And then the other thing I think is really important, and this was something that it maybe could have gone on the previous slide too, talking about some tactics that a company can use, which is, every team now, especially today, especially now that CRM has been prevalent for well over a decade on a larger scale, you're most likely, if you're coming from, we don't have a CRM, or we've got, just a very basic tool, and we want to go to something like a Salesforce or a Microsoft, there's got to be colleagues within your team or perhaps within your organization that have been on one of those platforms. Not only is it invaluable to get some of their insight just as you're making decisions, perhaps they have insight on, hey, it was rolled out horribly, it didn't go well, and we needed to, here's what we could have done different, or this is what my old company did really, really well. I think this would really help us. But not only that, but just having that peer-to-peer perspective, right? Sort of removing a little bit of the top-down information structure of, here's some people that have had success, or at least have been in a platform that we're considering, or a contemporary CRM, and why don't you help facilitate some of those conversations between, those folks and some of the people on the ground level, if you will. Over the years, I've learned to make CRM a great tool. I mean, it's part of my job, right? It's no different than getting up and every day and being expected to make a certain number of calls and to set up appointments and to close a certain amount of business. It's no different with the CRM, and that's just it's a fundamental part of what I do on a day in and day out basis. Of course, I've been on it for many years, and I know, again, this webinar is designed to sort of reach folks that may be thinking about it or haven't really considered until now, maybe looking at a new CRM. I think that once your reps and the team knows that it can be a great tool for them. It could be something that can make their life easier, and helping to deploy tactics to make sure that information is shared up front will certainly help that process in the long haul. And over the years, I mentioned to you at the start of my part of the discussion today, which is, there's been a lot of consistencies that I've, despite being in different product categories and different industries, working for different, let's call it, personalities of companies, right? Different sales teams and managers. The one thing that's always been consistent with CRM is it's my go-to place for all my information. As I get older and life seems to get more hectic, as it does for a lot of us, I can't keep track of things even a week ago sometimes when I'm having conversations with certain folks, and I know whether I enter it through my mobile application or I enter it on my desktop or I connect my email and everything's tracking appropriately, or my appointments are listed in my CRM. I know that I can go back in at any moment and gather that information, whether my director or my supervisor is asking me for information, or if I'm getting ready to re-engage with a client I haven't talked to in several months. Bottom line is, as long as I'm using that CRM appropriately, which I've forced myself to learn over the years, then that's what makes it the best tool for me, is just knowing that information is always readily available, as well as giving me insights into my business, into my territory and my pipeline. And then, of course, using CRM in today's marketplace, I almost hesitate to even talk about today's marketplace because it's evolving daily, it's evolving weekly, and I think companies are re-strategizing on their sales teams and folks may be scattered remotely permanently. We don't know. And certainly, messaging has become more important than ever. Centralizing your marketing campaigns, understanding what's going out and when, and having that visibility for the folks that are either doing cold prospecting or working with active clients, or those who are doing account management versus those that are doing, that are hunting the CRM. We think, especially here at LedgeView, that this is only going to be more and more important. And some of the integration with the additional tools that are out there with your company, with the additional applications that are out there for different departments, whether it's, think of inventory or contracts department, or finance and legal, all of these things can touch CRM in some fashion. And having, again, that centralized or that unified platform in a market where we're seeing a lot of decentralized workforces and decentralized campaigns will only help things. As I close out, I just have to say, CRM is a great tool for salespeople. It's something that I've learned to adopt many, many years ago, and it's actually something that I would have conversations with as I'm interviewing with an organization. Hey, what CRM platform are you all using? What are some of your processes that you could share with me to help give me insights into what kind of role I'm getting into? Because quite frankly, it's too important to be able to collect information and to have that information presented appropriately. But not only that, to understand exactly where I am in my business and to be able to have better conversations, whether it's through prospecting, through working with active clients, or through, talking with my colleagues and my executive team. At the end of the day, it just helps me make me smarter. And that's why I thought it was a great little, conversation I could have today through this webinar medium and share some insight. So I hope you were able to grab, maybe a point or two that will help you as you're making decisions to implement a new CRM or to look at a contemporary platform. I again welcome you to please contact me directly, reach out to ledgeview.com, ledgeviewpartners.com, and ask some questions, gather some information. We'd love to share with you some of our approach and our services with respect to helping organizations implement new CRM platforms, marketing automation tools, or just to talk about, different sales, marketing, and customer service processes. But with that said, I'm going to close out, kick it back over to Chad, and let him share with you just a couple more things on the resources we have. Again, I thank you all for joining me.
Thanks, Jason, and really appreciate you going into the past and sharing some of those experiences. And I'm sure a lot of people really can relate to those things and hopefully can overcome them earlier and really embrace CRM and all that it can do to help in sales, connecting with customers and closing deals. Now, if anybody has any last minute questions or comments, again, you can put those in your go to webinar question pane, and we'll follow up with you after the webinar. Jason's information is on the screen, and you can contact him directly. And as Jason reiterated before we say goodbye, I want to remind you that LedgeView Partners has a slew of resources on our website, including ebooks, infographics, on-demand webinars, weekly tips from our blog that not only focus on Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics 365, but thought leadership topics like sales, marketing, customer service, and the list goes on. And you can find all those at ledgeviewpartners.com. And depending what you're using in terms of a CRM solution, if anybody would like to see a personal demo of Salesforce or Dynamics 365, we have those on demand, but we'd be love to set up a personal demo as it can really show you how it can relate to your role specifically and your organization specifically. So let us know, and we're happy to set that up. So until then, please take care, stay safe, stay well, and have a great rest of your day. Till next time.